Welcome in this little On Texas football special CJ Vogel and I have for you today. It's Quinn Ewers versus Cade Klubnik, part 2. These guys have met once before. For the Texas fans that don't remember this, that maybe don't follow high school football closely. Southlake Carroll and Austin Westlake played in the 6A state championship game in 2020. And we're going to dive into that a little bit because there are a number of players coming up in this first round playoff game when Clemson heads to Austin that played in that Southlake Carroll versus Austin Westlake state championship game in 2020. Before we get to that, though, I want to thank the sponsor of today's show. That is Carrot Concierge. Carrot Concierge, are you looking for the right gift for the right woman in your life? You better be. Make sure you check out the carrotconcierge.com. Jody Reynolds is a personal jeweler. She is the Carrot Concierge with an office right there in Westlake. Hey, that's meaningful in this show. Jody focuses on helping men purchase a special gift for the woman in your life. You can use the QR code on the screen to see even more or visit her on Instagram or her website, thecarrotconcierge.com as well. Jody prides herself in providing personal service. She takes the extra steps to make sure your lady gets exactly what she wants. And because she just doesn't have the overhead of a storefront, she can often get higher quality inventory at lower prices, as much as 30% less than what you'd see at a jewelry store. If you're looking for something for that special birthdays or anniversary, and with Christmas right around the corner, Jody has a variety of tennis bracelets, rings, necklaces, and more. All beautiful jewelry, gorgeous jewelry, all personalized for you and yours. Again, check out carrotconcierge.com, visit her website, or give her a call or text and take care of that special someone in your life. All right, CJ Vogel, a lot of intrigue, a lot of storylines that are going to be woven into this Texas Clemson game next week in the first round of the college football playoff. The biggest one that will be talked about as we get close to this game is Quinn and Cade have met before with everything on the line. In 2020, in the state 6A state championship game, Austin Westlake beat Southlake Carroll and Quinn Ewers 52-34. And it was one of those games where CJ was interesting because Quinn he played in 8 games that year. He missed 6 games, middle of district, first 2 playoff games, came back for the last 4 playoff games with a hernia, which he had surgery on and came back to play in that game. But CJ, there was it was a game in which Austin Westlake was the better team and won the game, but that ended up being the first of 2 times these guys were going to meet in a meaningful game.
Yeah, of course. It's funny how that's working out, right? One's for a state championship, the other's for the path to a national championship, just at different levels, of course. Now it should be flip-flopped, right? Cade Klubnik, probably the more talented team, probably the deeper team as well. You talk about D1 talent. They probably have a little bit more down in Westlake. On the flip side, when they meet again next Saturday, Gerry, it's Texas. That's going to have a deeper, more talented team, one that is looking to send double-digit number of players back to the NFL draft for the second consecutive year. A bit of a difference right there. But you mentioned it, 52-34. A lot of points scored in that game. A lot of notable names there, and I'll let you dive into some of them. But Michael Taff, a big-time player both on offense and defense. Also in the return game a little bit there. Someone that I'm sure Quinn Ewers is pretty happy to have on his side this go-around.
Yeah, you gotta wonder what that call was like between Taff and Cade Klubnik when the playoff matchup came out, right? But I think we have the box score of that game, and that game was interesting. I remember watching that game because Austin Westlake was able to get a lot of pressure on Quinn. Quinn was limited in his movement in that game coming off the hernia surgery. He was pretty much gutting it through to get his team to the state championship game. He did a great job coming back from injury, but Quinn was 23 of 39. 351 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions in that game. Both of those interceptions, Michael Taff, teammate now at Texas. Michael Taff picked him off twice in that game. 3 sacks given up by Southlake. He was under a lot of duress. One of those sacks, Ethan Burke, who was a junior on that team. So Austin Westlake, 2 of his teammates got after Quinn pretty good in that game. On the flip side, Cade Klubnik. Southlake really didn't have an answer for Cade Klubnik in the short passing game and then in the QB run game. Cade Klubnik was 18 of 20 for 220 yards with 1 touchdown. And then he obviously his go-to receivers in that game, Michael Taft, Jaden Greathouse at Notre Dame, also in the college football playoff, by the way, and Keaton Kubeka, who plays up at Kansas. So a lot of college football flavor in this game as well. But Klubnik also had 17 carries for 97 yards and 2 touchdowns in the game. So, I mean, it was a game that another starter for Austin Westlake on the offensive line, Connor Robertson, another guy in the college football playoff, a young sophomore backup defensive end in that game who got action in the playoffs, but not in that game until late, Colton Vosick, another Texas Longhorn, CJ. So that game was littered with players in the college football playoff. And funny enough, a lot of them are now teammates, and they're going to go up against each other December 21st.
Yeah, it's funny, the year after is when you started to hear about the twin towers of Colton Vosick and Ethan Burke, but this was really the first game for Ethan Burke to make himself kind of known around the Texas high school football world. Of course, you mentioned the tackle for loss, a sack. He was getting after it in that first game, of course, still a lacrosse player at that time, so not full go at football. That wouldn't come until about this time the next year. But you talk about guys that can make impact plays across the board. I kind of want to go down a little bit and see. There you go, Michael Taft, 22 yards on a kickoff return.
Yep.
He got the 2 interceptions. He had 5 receptions for 50 yards. Michael Taft was doing everything on the field. Oh, and then you go back and you look at the highlight interceptions. Gerry, one of them was an Odell Beckham style one-handed leaping grab behind him that ended up making the Sports Center top 10s and all the rounds on the highlights. That was Michael Taft doing that when there was really nobody wanting to call his name, wanting to call his number in the recruiting world. Now he's one of the biggest names ahead of the best defense in the country going up against his high school quarterback. To your point, and we saw Cade Klubnik's reaction to whenever it was announced Texas would play Clemson. I think he knows who he's going to be going up against and how much of an opportunity it is for him to come back to Austin where he grew up and play in front of his childhood friends.
And there's also 2 more little keynotes around that game. The head coaches in that game, Todd Dodge, obviously former Texas quarterback, that was the best Westlake team I've ever seen. Now the head coach at Lovejoy from CJ's neck of the woods. Riley Dodge, head coach at Southlake, still the head coach at Southlake. They're 14-0. Good luck to Riley Dodge and the Dragons this weekend. Obviously, Riley Dodge ended up at North Texas, but still a big University of Texas fan to this day. CJ, you mentioned it, you led into it. There was 2 5-star rated prospects in that game. Quinn at quarterback and Ethan Burke in lacrosse. He was considered one of the very best, like McDonald's All-American level if there was a basketball game that All-Star game in lacrosse. He was that guy. And then there's also this. Maybe a little double barrel action for Cade Klubnik. He grew up an A&M fan in an A&M family. So he gets to play Texas in the college football playoff in DKR. Man, CJ, there's a lot going into this game. And now we got to get to the college portion of this and take a look at Quinn and Cade and talk about these guys in this game coming up. I know we're 10 days out, but we wanted to mention the high school game, all the Texas Longhorns, Clemson Tiger there, Cade Klubnik, all the connections in this game from the coaches on. And now we look at the stats for this year. Obviously, Quinn missed a couple of games this year. But CJ, Cade Klubnik is a guy who really improved in this year as a starting quarterback. He's getting to that point where he's had enough experience, making better decisions, and he's come up with a big year. And when Clemson needed it the most, because they were on the ropes if they were going to get in the college football playoff.
Yeah, 100%. And it's kind of been a rocky road for Cade, right? It was pretty ugly with Clemson and DJ Uiagalelei, and then you look at what's next up, and it's the Gatorade National Player of the Year, coming off of one of the more successful high school careers in the state of Texas at the highest level and classification. Cade was kind of thrust into, all right, you're the savior, you're the guy that's supposed to contain or keep Clemson remaining at the top of college football. And that's a tough ask. Yeah. And it didn't start off too pretty, but you're looking at the numbers right now, 3,700 total yards, 40 total touchdowns, 5 interceptions. It's pretty good. And I know that college football has changed quite a bit. A 750 win percentage might not be viewed as, elite as it was back in the day. That's still pretty darn good. Of course, just came off of ACC championship as well. But for Cade specifically this year was to cut down on the turnovers, cut down on some of those, head scratching plays. Gerry, he has 8 games this year, 3 or more passing touchdowns, and that doesn't even include where his legs come into a threat. And we saw that in the box score for the state championship, ran for 97 yards, lost 14 yards on sacks, so really about 112 or so. But his legs are an issue. And if Texas, isn't fully keen in on what he can do athletically, let me share a quick story for you. Because the first time I came into contact with Cade, I hit up Coach Salazar, the now head coach at Austin Westlake, said, hey, I hear you guys got a pretty good offensive lineman. Let me come check him out. Texas just offered him. Ended up being Connor Robertson. I walk into the gym. It's the off season, probably around early April, late January, right off of one of these runs to the state championship. And I look in the gym after they go through an entire day in the weight room. They go do mat drills. They're worn out, exhausted. The team breaks out and they walk into the locker room, go take showers, go to class. I look over, there's a couple kids shooting hoops. And Cade Klubnik walks over there. He grabs the ball from one of the basketball players warming up for their practice. And just inside the restricted zone, that little circle, right? Standing windmill dunk, grabs the ball back, takes a couple steps back behind the three-point line, splashes another one. And before the ball bounces again, he grabs it, dunks again. I'm like, that was one of the more athletic things I've seen from a quarterback right after a full workout, nonetheless. But that's the kind of athlete that Cade is. Also a track kid back in the day in the 200s. So Texas will have to be very wary about where his legs are and how mobile he will be in this game.
That's a great story, CJ. And I would say 2 things I think are key for Cade this year. Trust in his offensive coordinator. I think that relationship has come a long way in year 2 with Garrett Riley. And he's 30 pounds heavier than he was in high school, maybe 35 now. So he's actually strong enough to take the hits, play through some contact when he runs the football, finish some runs falling forward. Not that he's a powerful guy, but just finish the runs and not get knocked sideways on contact in major college football. Those are the 2 things I've noticed with his maturity from last year to this year. As I think there's total trust between him and his OC and head coach now. And I think he's physically reached that maturity point in terms of strength and adding the weight to his frame that has been really, really key for him taking that next step along with the experience. CJ, then we have Quinn. Look, you said on our State of the Program Wednesday that this is Quinn's legacy in the playoffs coming up. A&M was a big legacy win for him because he will always be undefeated against A&M at Texas because he is going to go. But now in the playoffs, after, they came up short a little bit last year against Washington, right? Had a chances in the red zone, didn't get it done. I think you're right, CJ. I think whether the expectations are too high or not, this is a legacy situation for Quinn headed into this game and the college football playoff.
Yeah, I think so, 100%. And there's more storylines to just Quinn versus Cade, right? Sarkisian made the decision to go in the portal and grab Quinn Ewers when, hey, you got the local kid coming off of several state championships.
No doubt. Great point.
It's also a big legacy moment for Steve Sarkisian as well, because this is the best defense that he's had. This is the oldest, most experienced offense that he has, and they're paired up together in the same year. You would think this is a pretty good situation to be in if you're a head coach looking to win a national championship. It starts round 1 against Clemson. And for Quinn specifically, to get back to his legacy, it's not been pretty sometimes when it comes to how Texas has won, but they've been winning, right? 11 wins again for the 2nd consecutive season. You beat Arkansas, Oklahoma, A&M in the same season. You're a play or 2 or a kick or 2 away from winning perhaps your 2nd consecutive conference championship. But now for Quinn, this is where you'll be remembered. Yep. These potential next 4 games, what do you do at home against Clemson? That's number 1. Then you'll go back to Atlanta, perhaps up to Arlington, and then back to Atlanta again. That's the path. But I do think that how Quinn Ewers will be remembered 20 years from now, 30 years, however long, it'll be because of his play against Clemson, Arizona State, and whoever else is on the road for the Longhorns in this college football playoff run.
It's going to be interesting, too, because these guys, there's some similarities for them headed into this game in that if you look at Clemson offense this year, they have senior running back, Phil Maffa, who's more he's not explosive back, but he's more of that downhill back. They've struggled to run the ball against the best defenses they played this year, just to be clear on that. But he's got somebody to hand the ball off to between the tackles. He's got a really good tight end that probably has a future in the NFL in Brenningsville. He'd have 2 receivers. One of them, Bryant Wesco from Midlothian, who Texas tried to recruit, and he just picked Clemson, and Antonio Williams, 2 really talented wideouts. And Wesco, being a freshman, really came on to give Clemson that second wide receiver as the season moved along, as he gained more experience. And then on the Texas side with Quinn, you have this tight end in Gunnar Helm, so there's similarity there. You have Trey Weiser, who's become a carry-the-load running back. And then you have a freshman receiver in Ryan Wingo, and then you have Matthew Golden, Mr. Consistency, if Isaiah Bond's healthy, right? I mean, DeAndre Moore, another guy you can count on. So there's some similarities there in the weapons they have. But here's, I think, is going to be the thing to watch with these guys. Can Clemson's offensive line hold up against Texas? They have struggled to run the football. They have not had big yardage outputs against the best team that they've played offensively. But defensively, they've given up 430 yards a game to the 5 teams they played that were 7-5 or better. So I think Cade may have to play under more duress than Quinn in this game, which would be a total flip, like you said earlier, from the state championship game. That's what's going to be interesting, because the one thing Texas wants, CJ, they want Cade running for his life in that game, not running downhill. They want him on the move, playing under duress.
East and West. And look, again, to Cade's credit this year, he's been really good at protecting the football. He doesn't have a game of multiple interceptions. Really, you look back at week 1 against Georgia, where he's 18 of 29, 142, no scores and a pick. His worst game by a mile.
Yeah.
However, you start looking at these other games. He's thrown for 200 yards in every single game except for one, in which it was 198. So,
right.
You basically round that one up, and he's found ways to move the ball through the air. It's all about what can you do to contain his legs, can you get pressure on him, et cetera. Gerry, I think there's also some interesting tidbits as well when it comes to players who were in that state championship game, also in the college football playoff this year, protecting the blind side of Quinn Ewers, Andre Karich, familiar name for the Texas Longhorns, now at Tennessee, but also not in that game, but on this roster for the Texas Longhorns, Andrew Makuba, who spent 2 years with Cade Klubnik at Clemson. So the ties, connections, storylines, they go wild in this game.
And RJ Maryland at SMU too, correct?
Absolutely.
Think about that. That's something we really have to break that in. Makuba, that's big too, and that'll be interesting. But it's not going to be negative chirping; it'll be some positive talking during that game. But Texas fans. I mean, look, there's so many tie-ins too, because Cade Klubnik is Austin Westlake, and he's coming home to face Texas in a playoff game, even though he grew up in an A&M family. There's a lot to unpack with this game that we have the next week or so to do. We're 10 days away from that college football playoff game. But we want to take a few minutes today and talk about Quinn Ewers versus Cade Klubnik. Round 2. Round 1 went to Klubnik and Austin Westlake, but they were favored in that game. Quinn was playing through injury and hurt his rib in that game as well. But just an interesting look back on their 2 careers from that point on and where they're at now. And I think the one thing that's safe to say is with Cade Klubnik, with the way he's built his body and the way he's improved as a quarterback here, there's a good chance both these guys are going to play in the NFL on some level. How much starter, all that has to come down the line. But both of these quarterbacks, pretty good chance they're going to be playing in the NFL one day, which adds even more intrigue to this game, because that means they could play again in the future. Saturday may not be the last time they play once again. We may have to do another one of these videos in a couple of years.
Fingers crossed, right? Hopefully by then we're talking about a 1-1 versus 1-1, right? But it'll be exciting. A lot of storylines, a lot of former teammates. Obviously, Quinn versus Cade. Texas in the better situation, much like the opposite with Cade coming in better situation at Westlake.
Yeah, there you go. For CJ Vogel, I'm Gerry Hamilton. Thank you for watching this little special edition of On Texas Football. Quinn Ewers versus Cade Klubnik, round 2.